Oracle, mainly in the social experience, social customer experience, and the trends that you are writing in your book. I think that you just published a new book. Okay. If you would like to comment.
Yeah, of course. Should I just talk generally? Do you should,
Yes.
or and then maybe you ask questions? Is that
If it's that possible, yes. Sure.
Of course, sure. Today I talked about the sort of the importance of experience, customer experience, but not from a reaction standpoint, meaning that let's invest in technology because customers are getting social, but let's invest in technology because we understand the experience we want our customers to have. And we understand that beyond technology, there's a philosophy associated with social. So, for example, we want our customers to love us. We want our customers to stay loyal to us. We want our customers to refer future customers to us. Every business wants that, but not every business acts like that. So, for 30 years, one of the biggest complaints from customers have been sort of the automation of customer service and marketing, right, to the masses, aimed at churning and revolving, while important for businesses to improve their margins and profitability, it came at a cost of sort of the overall customer experience, and we only really decided to invest in that experience when it mattered. So marketing, loyalty programs, but still everything was sort of at a distance. Customer centricity today requires that we actually get closer to customers and then find a way to use technology to scale, not in the traditional sense of scaling, but in the sense of relationship scaling. So we're not talking about relationship management. What we're talking about is engagement throughout the customer life cycle in ways that sort of promote the amplification of an experience. So if customers are connected to hundreds or thousands of people, then we want to create moments throughout the life cycle that get them to share their experiences so that we can scale. Now, that means that technology is an enabler, but what I wanted to introduce today was the idea that it's also philosophical, meaning that to be social means that you have to see the importance of actually just human interaction, human connection. And to understand human connection means that you have to realize the world isn't like you, and the world isn't like me. We grew up in a very different era, but yet we still believe that to this day people are going to make decisions the way they always have. Even though it's slow and changing, and this is true for countries around the world. It's not an overnight thing. It's popular, it's trendy, but it's not the majority yet. But I argue that we're not competing for the majority. We're not competing for right now. We are making investments today to be relevant 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it sort of comes back to what's your overall goal and mission of your business. Are you here to compete for the moment and pocket as much profit as you can? Or are you here to make a profit, deliver a great customer experience, and earn longevity as a result? And to me, that's a philosophical discussion. When your mind and your heart are in the right place, then technology becomes a powerful enabler that's a differentiator, it creates value, and I think more importantly, it's a competitive advantage. So that's really what I wanted to convey today through my discussion.
Do you feel Oracle is following this model with the new technologies they have acquired in the social landscape?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, what they realize is that customers are distributed, right? And not only is to reach them is distributed, but also that is an advantage too. If they're distributed, that means you can scale your sort of value proposition, but you have to be able to find them and learn what's meaningful to them and then engage them in ways that they're going to appreciate. So the technology that they're acquiring and that they're building is certainly going to help with that. I think one of the speakers this morning talked about the importance of behavior, and he used sort of the example of the Pope 5 years ago and today. And what I think didn't get really communicated in that is that when it's not just about capturing a moment with the camera phone. It's about the way you see the world, and you see the world through a lens of glass, and that changes whether it's a notebook, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a phone, and the context of how you use that is different.
Okay.
So the technology that they're investing in is one part. I think also the discussions that they're having in helping their customers better understand how to look at the world in the same way of their customers in order to be able to create experiences that mean something here and here and here, and also here in the real world. You have to think about it sort of individually, right? Instead of, for example, build a website, right?
Okay.
And then add technology that allows your website to be viewed on different screens, right? That's a one-to-many thing. But instead, thinking about the behavior, like Oracle said this morning, I know that you're going to use a tablet maybe in the same way you might use this, but not at all like how you're going to use this. So why wouldn't you redesign a website completely from scratch to take advantage of the ways that you use these different things and still contribute to a greater holistic experience, because you define what that experience is, just execute it differently on the different platforms. So that's where Oracle's moving. All the smart technology platforms are going to move that way. The question is, can business leaders, IT professionals, marketing professionals see the world that way? So they have to see the world outside of their position within the company and see this greater movement of consumerism to be able to lead those types of experiences. Otherwise, it's just a technology play.
It's kind of like you were saying one of your Facebook status that technology is not social media is more like psychology and sociology than technology, and this could be proved to enterprises, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. Many of the smarter organizations employ anthropologists, psychologists. So, for example, Zappos is famous for having an on-staff psychologist to keep keep their employees very happy, very motivated, very focused on helping other employees. Intel and Nokia have hired anthropologists to better understand sort of human behavior. But the difference is that in, let's say, Intel or Nokia's, even Microsoft employs an anthropologist or two. It's the disconnect between their research and product development, or their research and findings and marketing or sales or service implementation. So the idea is that at some point the future CMO and CIO is going to have an expert social scientist who's going to be able to help them make decisions about what types of platforms to invest in and why, and what behavior is going to look like 5 years from now. So let me give you an example. A lot of companies I work with make investments on the IT side based on the existing infrastructure that they have today. They're terrified of completely abandoning 20 years worth of technology investments. It's held together with tape and chewing gum, and it doesn't necessarily work with the way that people are working. They're just trying to adapt because it's more efficient to do that. But Oracle's creating new technologies that, say, for example, allow you to almost start from scratch in a way that's a lot more conducive to the way that people talk to one another, the way that people hope to talk to businesses today. So you can make a technology investment, or you can make a technology investment based on how people are interacting inside and outside the organization. So a lot of research that we've done at Altimeter Group, for example, will show if you deploy an enterprise social network as a way of bringing or improving collaboration within the company without talking to people about why they're not collaborating with one another today, you're destined to fail. And a lot of it has to do with just morale and employee unhappiness and trying to figure out what leadership means to inside the organization. So if you're going to roll out new technology that's going to change how people interact, then you have to introduce sort of this new, greater purpose around it, with leaders sort of demonstrating why we're doing this and actually using the platforms. So it's changing from a technology roadmap sort of strategy to say, this is what we're going to be doing 5 years from now. And then if you have changes or needs, then we'll evaluate it based on that roadmap. But to better understanding how social science sort of plays into the meeting needs and changing expectations of employees and customers. One of the greatest examples of that is sort of the big disconnect between today's managers and today's millennials. Mm-hmm. Millennials are arguably a very selfish generation. Not a bad thing, just different. Yeah. So how do you manage against that when you philosophically disagree with the way that they're brought up? You can't. You have to first say, as a manager, I understand where you're coming from, and find ways to sort of work with them to collaborate. Because not doing that is going to create tension, and that tension at some point is going to strain elasticity within the organization. So you can't solve that with technology. You have to solve that with social science. That, to me, is one of the biggest opportunities. And when you combine that, social science and technology investments, you're gonna be so far ahead of your competition. It's you might even force your competition in a digital Darwinism.
I noticed like two highlights in your conference. The first one to me was the audience that have audiences. I would like you to go deeper into that concept and benefits for the companies.
Yeah, well,
By doing marketing in that sense.
I'll give you an example. I came up with that idea with my last book, The End of Business as Usual. And it had to do with an experience that I personally had. This is a funny story. A lot of people don't know this story. Have you ever been to a conference where they show on the wall all the tweets as people are presenting? Okay, you can blame me for that. So many, many, many years ago, a good friend of mine and I were going to keynote the Web 2.0 conference in San Francisco. And we decided to show the power of Twitter by building an app that could take tweets around keywords and put them into a stream. This is before there was a Twitter search. And we displayed that in real time on the wall as we were talking. And it was called The Conference Heard Around the World, because the reality was that people were having fun with it. This was before there were any sort of manners.
Okay, those good times.
People were saying the first thing that came to their mind, and a lot of it was silly. But over the years, as that became just a common thing, I started to notice that speakers had a real big problem with it, that they were frustrated with how conferences were letting people tweet, and it was distracting, and it was taking away from them, and it was making them feel less confident. And I thought to myself that this was the beginning of the future of engagement. So it's where the concept of the audience with an audience of audiences was born, because it was true. So I would argue with speakers, and then I took that in my last book and said, for businesses, you can argue all you want about whether or not they should tweet or blog or update Facebook while you're talking. I said, but that's arrogant, because whether it's on a wall or not, it's still going to happen. So you can either get mad and do things the way you always have, or you can realize that there's an opportunity there. And so the experiment that I had was, what if I changed the way I talked? Because if I talk and I show PowerPoint slides with a bunch of bullets, and I sit behind a podium and I'm reading my notes and screens and not making engagement, then I'm by default going to distance myself from the audience. But if I could realize that they were going to tweet that experience anyway, or they were going to blog that experience anyway, how could I engage? I would say, how can I talk to you and through you at the same time? How can I get you to say what I'm saying and repeat it back to everybody, and say things that are so interesting, valuable, that I can channel a greater audience? If there's 1,000 people in a room, we're talking to 30,000 people, and then have that do something, right? So whether I'm a business and I want more followers, or I want a business and I want more leads, or I'm a business and I want more traffic, to design your story in that way. So as a speaker, I would always say, look, pretend I'm a brand, pretend I'm a business, and you are my customers. Because right now I could get mad and I could try to talk at you and sell you and get you to look at me, or I can realize that the advantage to me was to talk to your foreheads, so that I could just keep doing, you could do this, and I could just talk through you. That, to me, I would rather see your forehead than your eyeballs, because then that means that I'm talking through you. So in order to do that, I have to change how I talk. I have to make slides more visual. I have to make the words on the slides less than 140 characters. I have to really think through how to make a message interesting in less than 140 characters. And that psychologically is a complete shift in how I talk and how I would convey a value. So businesses need to make that shift. To engage this audience with an audience of audiences, you can't just throw a crazy cool commercial and a viral video and hope that always this is going to be what it takes to be successful. It has a philosophical crux in how you appreciate this consumer, and therefore how you engage it. So it sort of redefines what customer experience could be. So this is why social science comes in. This is why some clever marketing and new types of content creation come in. The way that a company talks and acts is going to have to change in order to connect in a real meaningful way for them to then become part of your story, to become part of your platform, to become part of your marketing, to become part of the life cycle. So that influence loop, if you remember in the dynamic customer journey, you can invest in that. You don't have to be surprised by the experiences that people have and share. You can absolutely engage them in ways that are going to create experiences that influence the decisions of others.
Bad news for politicians and evil companies, don't you think?
Yeah,
I was
it's
looking
true.
at this cloud of words that you put, and I said, oh, really bad news for evil companies that are still trying to make the most profit immediately, not thinking in the future and not even having humanistic corporate values. Do you deal with these companies, and how do you? What tools do you use to try to make them change their minds, their materialistic evil? We can say minds. No?
It takes a.
What tools do you need?
It takes a superhero to fight.
Yeah.
There's no one answer. I often say that I'm in the business of change management because this is really what it comes down to. And the only way to have those types of conversations is not through technology. For example, I was in Japan last week or 2 weeks ago, and they had said that their politicians are just now going to be allowed to use the internet for campaigns. And so that was Japan's answer, was don't use technology. As if that would stop people from talking to people. So the reality is that there's sort of this great ignorance in sort of command and control. But now that people have an audience of audiences, right, they are becoming more powerful as a front of people than I think governments or evil businesses can give credit. Now, when I talk to a business, though, you have to sort of assess where they're coming from. Not every business is going to be changed. This is why digital Darwinism is a good thing, right? This is also not an overnight thing, but you have to believe that most businesses want to do the right thing. But it's a value system, right? A lot of CEOs today within organizations are incentivized to increase profits because they don't report to customers. They report to shareholders, right? So it's not an evil thing. It's just a way of reality. So it's just better understanding how can you give both? How can you increase shareholder value while increasing customer experiences? So some of the more elite businesses are figuring that out, like Harley Davidson, Apple Computers, Disney, Zappos, but it's few and far between because those businesses started with customer experience in mind and created profits because of that. And the reason is that all science and data shows that if you create a more meaningful experience designed by a higher purpose, right? The company is doing this because it aims to ... Those companies will always historically outperform companies that report to shareholders and just try to improve value, right? Just look at Mac versus PCs. I mean, it's just always been that way. And customers have always said they're willing to pay more, as high as 15% more if they know they're going to get good service and experiences from it. So this is why you see things like the Vitamix blenders that are coming out now. People are willing to pay $750 for a blender. I think that's incredible. But they know that they're going to be part of a lifestyle and get an experience that they believe is going to improve their life. So when you look at what experiences customers are having versus the experience that, let's just say, is what's in the vision statement today, you can show a disconnect right now. And business leaders are either going to see an opportunity in that or they're just going to dismiss it. And those business leaders that dismiss it, I don't have any interest in working with them whatsoever. But those leaders that say, I had no idea it was like that, what do we need to do? Then we can start to put together steps and frameworks of how to save that, one department at a time, an experience at a time. There's processes to do that, but you have to want to fix that. So the way I start everything is by showing the problems. And the problems are external, and the problems are always internal too. So I'll give you an example. In America, this phone is on the AT&T network. And AT&T had the exclusive rights to the iPhone when it was first launched in the United States. And to this day, AT&T, it's better now, but for years it was the worst. And they were absolutely assholes about communicating the service, just the faults of the service, or even acknowledging the faults of the service to their customer base. And when you do studies to see how customers feel about AT&T as a service provider, people would say that they had a reluctant relationship with the provider because it's cheaper to stay with them than it is to cancel their contract. Who wants to have a reluctant relationship with the business? Right? I think that's appalling. But
You can depend on that.
yeah, they're making a great amount of money though because people have reluctant relationships with it. So imagine if they decided to care and make that customer experience better. I believe that they could be an incredibly more profitable company than they are today. They could leave all of their competitors behind. But right now they're trying to use the argument that they're the best technology, they have the best platform, they have the best services, the best programs. It's, yeah, sure. But that, I think, at some point becomes a commodity, right? Everybody can invest in features and benefits and try to spin that a different way, but you can only have relationships that are unique to you. And I believe that investing in relationships starts with leadership. And if a leader isn't going to be a leader, then that company is going to have a real hard time, with trying to get the evil out. Which is why I love that show. I don't know if you have it here in Mexico, called Undercover Boss.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic because at the end of every episode is this great sense of empathy, feeling. People say, "Wow, I understand. I see that I forgot what it was like to be a customer. I forgot what it was like to be an employee," and everybody's crying at the end of every show. And it's good because they sort of remember what it's like to be a human being again. So to me, that's how you make the case, is sort of show them the Undercover Boss experience. Thank you.
No problem.
4 years ago, you were about to launch this book called Engage. And now you have a new book. What's been different since then to this book?
Well, Engage was a book, social media was really taking off when I wrote Engage. And one of the things that I had noticed back then, I don't even remember what year that was 2008, 2009?
2009.
2009, like beginnings.
I remember that one of the things that I had originally noticed already was that people were using social media as a way to do what they'd always done, and that was broadcast messages at people. And realizing, of course, that wasn't going to help my case for social media, and that it was only going to hurt everybody trying to do the right thing by, for example, one of the most common things I saw are people asking, what are other companies doing? What are some of the best practices? Can you give me examples of how companies are using Facebook and Twitter? And when you do that, you end up perpetuating the problem because it's sort of assumed that those companies are doing things against a greater vision or mission with business objectives, which is why Charlene and I wrote that report this year to show that businesses their social media strategies and business objectives aren't even close. And that was to sort of slap the industry in the face and say, wake up. So I wrote that book in 2009 as a way of saying, hey, we're already off track. Here's a way to think about it much more strategically. And it's not just marketing, it's service. And by the way, customers, when they see a Facebook presence, they're not just there to be marketed to. They might need customer service. They might want to be an employee. They might have ideas to improve the products or services. So how do you run a Facebook profile or a Twitter strategy that encompasses all of the different types of scenarios people want to have relationships with you? Can't just be held in the marketing department. So Engage was really designed to help business become more strategic back in 2009. Still the same argument today.
How long? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is a subject that for me it's so passionate about. We've been talking about evolution for 4 years, and you've had the luck to know what CEOs think in North America, and you're one of the few people who actually have more contact with Latin America also, right? I know from Charlene that you have a lot of Mexican customers and Latin American customers, so you have a greater vision, I think, that how is the Latin American industry and the North American industry different, and why are we not evolving as fast as we should, right?
There's a diversity in the customer base too, right? I mean, so smartphone penetration is growing here, growing across Latin America, but it's not, say, to the transformative levels that we're seeing in other parts of the world. It's going to get there, of course, but there are still, even in America, by the way, Latin American customers and Hispanic customers are still largely reached by traditional mediums, so radio and billboards. But that is all changing, right? Because my argument was it doesn't matter when you look at the greater form of consumer, right? Yes, if you say, show me my entire audience set, you will see that a majority are still influenced by traditional media. But the point is that the only growing segment of your customer base are the connected groups, right? They just vary market by market. The point is that if you're not catering to them their way, you're already missing an opportunity to build early relationships with them as they grow, because you're going to have to learn. So with Engage, the problem is that executives don't care about social media because the people who are running social media strategies don't care about business objectives. So it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
And they're demonstrating that they don't care because all they do is talk about Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, whatever's next. And executives are demonstrating that they don't care because they say employees only talk about Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, and they don't use those applications, right? But when you can align the two around the language of the C-suite and you can say, look, I did my research, I found out that 27% of the Mexican population, I'm making this number up, but are incredibly engaged on portable devices and through IM, through chat, through apps, through this and that, and they're completely disengaged from traditional media. So we feel that in order to grow our market opportunity, that a pilot program that invests in this will help us align with our goals of 2014 by reaching this. So once you start to think like the executives, technology and platforms start to just become sort of enablers of the business objectives. So in order to get to that place, I wrote at the end of Business as Usual, which was my last book. I decided that the argument wasn't going to be one over social media, it was going to be one over business dialogue. So I spent the first half of that book talking about the changing landscape of consumerism, to try to open the eyes of people who read the book to say it's bigger than social media. And then the last half trying to bring about change management. Then I wrote this last book called What's the Future of Business in a completely different way, to simplify that message even more, to show that there are really just 4 distinct moments of truth. People share experiences. If you don't try to create experiences, they're going to share the experiences that they have, not the ones that you necessarily want. And this is how it's going to affect your business. And so, by the way, your boss is never going to get this. In your lifetime, they're not going to ever come to you and say, I woke up, had a dream last night, and I see the future. It's never going to happen. But if you can make the case based on these points, you will get their attention. So if the one thing that somebody sent me a note this morning and said, you know what I've observed with all of your books is that they've become less complicated along the way, and that they've become more elevated along the way. And the truth was that was the point. None of technology is going to solve the world's problems unless we understand what the root problem. And the new book is really designed to say, look, the only person within the company who's going to get anybody to see things your way is you. So how can you change the way you talk? Just like I had to change how I talk and how I present and how I write.
And we can notice that.
Do you see the same barriers when you talk to executives at the US and in Latin America? And is the rate of adoption actually the same? I ask you this because we were talking with Mark Hurd, and he said that cloud is being adopted faster in Latin America, according to Oracle. Do you see that as well, or is Latin America slower?
I think that it depends on the technology. I mean, Latin America is definitely a rapidly growing industry for technology and across the board. But leadership,
Yeah, exactly.
that's I don't know. I don't have any data on leadership, but I can tell you that the country's culture does affect risk aversity, right? So, for example, in Japan, one of the most interesting things that I had found with a lot of the executives I was talking to is that one of the big disconnects is that leadership does things a certain way. It's a very Japanese way. And younger employees were either afraid to say anything to their boss, or they're just culturally not allowed to present to their boss that way. They have to earn the boss's trust. They have to speak in a certain way, bowing, earning their respect and getting a better relationship as they go on. Latin America is just a very tried and true way of doing business. It's hard to step out and prove that somebody's doing something differently when the case studies aren't necessarily there, right? The people who do the best things no one's talking about them, right? The people who are doing the best things in the United States aren't talking about them because it's a competitive advantage.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I think culturally there are natural obstacles. There are natural obstacles in the United States too. And the one thing that I've learned, and by the way, I spent a lot of time in Europe too, the culture of the country affects the decisions that a business leader will make. But what's true in every industry is if there can be data and a champion, and a champion within the organization has to have the mastery of being a politician, meaning that they're good with making the case, also good at being sort of an attorney or a lawyer because they have to present the case and find the evidence, and also just an evangelist, someone who's passionate that people can say, wow, maybe they're onto something. Those are the ingredients that work in every country I've ever been in. But there's not a lot of those people because they're either afraid or they're social media champions so they don't see the bigger opportunity, or they realize what it's going to take to convince their leadership. They understand all of the many different hats that they have to wear to bring about change, and they decide that it's not worth it, and they go someplace else. And so this is something that there people like me. Our job, I think, has to do to almost provide the air cover, to come out first and sweep a market to help executives see the bigger opportunity, so that people that are the champions have a platform. Right now, the platform is working in some cases, but not in all of the business cases. So here with Latin America, I think people are learning to find their feet to make the argument. I've done a lot of the seminarium programs across Latin America, and a lot of the attendees were there to learn better how other companies are doing it, and some were there to figure out how they can finally make the argument. So a lot of this still has to do with learning from an individual level too, that there's more to it, and that's part of the problem. And that means that if we keep looking at how other businesses are using technology, we're going to sort of miss what our real opportunity is. And right now we're sort of in that infancy still, where we call it a pitfall in this report that we just published, because you start to look at how other businesses are using new technology, then you start to emulate it, then you write a playbook about how to use these technologies across the organization, then you train against that so that people are informed, and then you come up with rules that sort of reinforce that engagement and how to use these new technologies and social networks across the organization, but never without defining the vision, mission, or purpose, or how to align it with business objectives. So what you end up doing is completely wasting time, because then you have to go back at some point. Someone's going to say, why are we doing this? It's such a waste. I looked at our Facebook page, and it just seems like such a waste. So you have to go back to the beginning in order to build it up again. So everybody's learning. Executives, but also social media professionals and IT professionals are also equally to blame, because they're also not trying to look at the bigger picture.
Talking like, what can we do? Talking like around social media club, those kind of organizations. I mean, as you said, you have like the ability to connect with the high tier executives. We as a social media club, we have the ability to connect with the low entry-level people, the social media managers, the guys who think they're community managers, but they just don't realize what the industry is really at. And as you said, they're champions, but they're just social media champions. There's this always disconnect between executives and these champions. What can the social media club, for example, do differently than what we've done these years to create that connection?
I was just talking to Chris here today. When he decided to do this, and I think I became a co-founder with him in, was it 2007?
Yeah. No, it's 2006.
That's 6.
7 years this month, actually. 7 years. Yeah.
The original motto was something that was inspired by what Chris had been doing before Social Media Club, which was called Brain Jams. And he had this motto, which was, if you get it, share it. Yeah. And the problem is that everybody thinks they get it, and that nobody thinks they have anything to learn. And it's like that analogy. If you go into a room of people that have had car accidents, and you ask people to raise their hand, who in this room is not a good driver? No one will raise their hand. Yet they're all in there because they had a car accident. But everybody will have an excuse. It was somebody else. It was somebody else. Somebody else.
Right.
So you look at the problem with social media and how, even the report shows that social media strategists are part of the blame as to why social media isn't getting more respect. And you ask them, who here has something to learn about ways that we could improve how we sell social media within the organization? Nobody's hands are going to go up because they think that they're doing the best that they can. It's just no one gets them. That leadership doesn't get it. That they're banging their head against the wall and that they're showing community management's working. The problem is that they're their own worst enemy. And what can you do is the same thing. What can I do, right? I was one of I wrote the social media manifesto ages ago. I was one of the guys saying this is going to be the future, and I was part of the problem. Which is why I wrote Engage. I assumed that people were going to realize that you can't get excited about the technology. You can't get excited about the channels, because if you do, then you're just going to be the new webmaster. You have to think about who, the guy at the organization today that makes more money than the webmaster is the UX guy. The UX guy does for a reason because he understands human behavior and how to design around that. Imagine if you were the UX designer for social media and how people click and how to enhance those clicks, or the engagement or the experiences within those communities. You're starting to think more strategically, right? But even still, you're still thinking in a silo. The best thing that the Social Media Club can do is realize that in order to champion social media and to make the business, not just from a technology perspective, but from a human perspective, more social, right? Philosophically more social, like as a mindset. That we talk, you talk, we learn, we grow together. Then conversations about best practices and people that you bring up and you feature, it's almost like you have to be more strategic with what you curate to show people that this is not good enough. And sometimes the truth is what we all need to start to challenge one another to be better. So I'm not saying that people don't get it. I'm just saying that studies show that no matter where we are in the world, people are where they want to be. And there's a comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly.
But community management is not what it's going to take to make social media a more integrated part of the business strategy and overall customer experience, unless you start trying to have those types of discussions where social media becomes an enabler, right? But as it fits within the greater ecosystem of digital, mobile, website, kiosk, whatever. How is that going to all play out in terms of an integrated channel? So one of my favorite examples of that, to answer your question, is Sephora, right? Sephora realizes social is just part of how people learn and share and make decisions about cosmetics. But they're going to use all kinds of different channels, including the real world. So then they took all of those people who run those different channels and moved them into an experiential group where the person who leads that is creating and leading customer experiences and then executing across the board. So people who want to make social media more understood and appreciated have to then start to do the work that shows that the customer experience has to come first. And there's a great video if you look it up. It's just Google my name and stop talking about social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the answer. Is it time for the book signing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have boots?